Hello everybody, I'm Shane O'Cass, the racing writer for the Daily Telegraph, and I'm out here at beautiful Osborne Park at the foot of the Blue Mountains in Sydney to make a big announcement. Joining me is Godolphin head trainer James Cummings and Darley Victoria General Manager Andy Makev. And Andy, I'll let you do the honours. What's the news?
Well, we've got some fabulous news here, Shane. We're announcing Impending to go to stud in Victoria at our Northwood Park property. He's a fantastically credentialed young stallion. He's by champion stallion Lonhro out of a champion mare in Nemesis, who's by a champion herself in Costa del Lago. Fantastic blood, wonderful horse, Group 1 winning horse.
Well, he certainly ticks a lot of boxes, Andy, and I suppose we start with his father Lonhro, a horse that has made an exceptional start to his stud career. He's a champion sire, of course, and now he's becoming a champion sire of sires. And of course I'm talking about horses like Piero. Darley have got a handful of horses themselves that are just starting out. So it's a wonderful line to tap into. Yeah,
I think Lonhro's now recognised as a sire of sires. No doubt he's done a fantastic job himself as a stallion and now as a sire of sires with horses like Piero, as you mentioned. He's certainly making his mark. We've stood Lonhro for a number of years since we took over Woodlands many a year ago, and he's been a champion stallion for us and the stalwart of our operation, really.
Yep, and looking obviously through the horse's dam line, it's got some wonderful broodmare sires in Costa del Lago, Canny Lad, Whiskey Road, and of course Vane. I don't think anyone will ever forget Nemeson's debut. I know where I was when it happened. She was an awesome filly.
Oh, she was a jet. She was, she was a gun 2-year-old. I think she ran 4th in a slipper, 2nd in a size, so she was a Group 1 class 2-year-old filly. She went on at 3 and was the gun 3-year-old filly. She won 1,000 guineas. She was a multiple Group 1 winner. She was just a star. So, as you mentioned, she's by Encosta. This colt's by Lonhro. So I would say that Lonhro and Encosta are clearly the best two colonial outcross stallions of the last 20 years. So we're combining fantastic blood, speed blood and colonial Australian blood. So it's fantastic.
Well, I'd have to say he's probably the best bred Lonhro at stud, or going to stud anyway, looking at his pedigree. It's a wonderful family. There's a Golden Slipper winner there, Full and By, Triple Crown winner. It's all over the place. There's precocious speed and horses that have trained on. And just talking about his race record, he had that all-important 2-year-old win, which breeders look for. And then, of course, as a 3-year-old, he won a Group 2 at the highest level. And then, of course, the Group 1 that every stallion needs.
Yeah, he won his 2-year-old race. He went to Brisbane and was a absolute tragedy beaten. I mean, he was a pretty good 2-year-old. He trained on to be an exceptional 3-year-old. He ran in all the good races. He ran against all the good horses. He's got form through the guns of his year. Yeah. And he won a Group 1. He won 1.7 million in prize money. Yeah. His mother was a millionaire. He's a millionaire. His race record's great. His pedigree's outstanding, and he's a ripper sort. Like, he is. We're literally talking about him. He's got presence. He's got fantastic hindquarter. He's a speed horse. He's good looking. He's clean-winded. He's just going to be a ripper horse to have at stud.
Well, he ticks a lot of boxes, and I'll talk to James in a minute about the horse's form, but I just wanted to touch on Victoria at the moment. The place seems to be going through an absolute renaissance. The sale was on the Premier with great results again. The stallion strength down there is terrific. Breeders just seem to be in a good place, super vobus, and I think the showdown is going to be a real asset to a horse like Impending, because $1 million 2-year-old race, this horse you'd think would be right in the mix to be throwing those sort of 2-year-olds, walking through the Premier with plenty to look forward to for the buyers.
Sure, I think if he throws to himself, they move like he moves. He's going to be a fantastic product for us to have there. And as you mentioned, he's the 2-year-old performance within his family. He's certainly going to be a showdown sort of horse. So things are on the move in Victoria. The rosters are strong in a lot of farms, including ours, and he's going to be a great addition to Victoria. Yeah.
Well, I think he slots in, a nice service fee for breeders. They can get back some of their money at the yearling sales. And as I mentioned, Vobus is going to be tremendous for this horse. A lot of syndicators are at our sales now. The syndicators won't have to do anything to sell a horse, foals of Impending. He's got a profile up and down the East Coast. Everyone knew the horse and everyone knew what he was capable of. Andy, no one knew that better than James Cummings. And James, I suppose in one way it's sad to farewell a horse like this from the barn. Not quite yet, but that's the job, isn't it, of the trainer, to turn these well-bred colts into Group 1 racehorses and then to join the roster at Darley.
Well, that's right, and as you saw just a moment ago, he looks pretty ready to go to stud. So one thing I know about this horse, and I haven't always trained Impending, I couldn't have been more impressed when I saw him debut as a late 2-year-old at Rose Hill, straight after the Autumn Carnival. He just looked really impressive that day, and beat some really good horses in that field that day. You know, future stakes winners were littered through the field. But I actually ran third to the horse in the Stan Fox when he was a spring 3-year-old, and you know, he looked like he had miler written all over him at the time. The horse had the right form lines going into the Caulfield Guineas, and had he not drawn off the track in the Caulfield Guineas, he certainly would have run a lot better. And the form through Divine Prophet, you know, clearly told you that, you know, he was the right horse at the right form line. When I started training the horse, though, having seen him after winning the Stradbroke, you know, he just had it written all over him that he looked like a 1,200 metre horse. And part of our racing team were quite convinced, and the words came from actually Jason Walsh, who's been with the organisation for a long time, that the horse reminded him a lot of another Lonhro that they had in training a few years ago called Mental. So we persevered with a plan in the Spring Carnival to target some Group 1 weight for age races. And we kicked off at weight for age in the Sydney Stakes, and he ran a slashing second behind In Her Time. You know, he couldn't have been more impressive, I felt. And you know, he was only a couple of lunges off beating her that day. He went down to Melbourne, and you wanted to see an 800 metre jump out with the horse, where he was Hugh Bowman in the saddle, just able to cruise up behind them, put a length on them really in a matter of a few strides, beating horses like Red Zell in the jump out. He graduated to the Darley Classic. He raced beautifully in the Darley Classic. He beat home Redkirk Warrior in the race. He beat home Chautauqua. That was probably like the best Darley Classic we've seen for many years. And in some ways, thanks to the Everest that was held just a few weeks before. But that was a massive result for the horse to put on show that Group 1 weight for age performance at 1,200 metres. And that's the sort of horse that I got to see when I started here, because he's bulked up when he got to 4. He looked a real man when he came into training. He's not completely finished with yet, and we have some races in mind with him, races like the Victory Stakes in Brisbane. Hopefully we can get him to a BTC Cup. Those sorts of races that Impending will really have at his mercy, I feel, if we can get him back in that sort of form.
Well, James, I just want to take you back to the Sydney Stakes for a moment, because it's a day that I well remember. The Sydney Stakes, as a lot of people will know, it was billed as the consolation to the Everest, and it had a lot of very good horses in it, a much bigger field. Now, Impending drew barrier 13 that day. The time of the race was quicker than Red Zell ran in the Everest, and that means technically the winner In Her Time and Impending run 1-2 in the Everest. Now, that kind of shows what a quality horse this is, what a quality performance it was. And on the day, I'm sure you remember, James, the horse was 12th, 13th on the turn. His sectional times, well, his last 600 was faster than what Chautauqua reeled off in the Everest. So he's a horse capable of a tremendous performance, not only on one day but on most days. So he really is a horse that breeders should take a very, very good look at. And Andy, I'm sure they will down in Victoria and in other parts as well. How can they get closer to Impending this spring and book themselves a mare?
Well, we're announcing our fees on April the 6th this year, and our whole roster, both in New South Wales and Victoria, so there'll be a further announcement with fees and things like that. But certainly he's a horse that'll parade magnificently at Northwood Park. He's a beautiful walking horse. He'll bowl around that ring there, and people are obviously welcome to come and see him whenever, but once he is actually retired from the racing stable. But he's just such an imposing horse with presence, and I just can't wait to start selling nominations in him. I think he's the right sort of horse for where we're at, he just profiles up so well. Gun horse, good looking horse, by a good stallion, out of a good mare, Group 1 winner. What more can you say?
Exactly, Andy. So if you want to get in touch with Andy or James or anybody at Darley, Godolphin, make sure you just log on to the website and make sure you're a part of Impending in his first season.